Hey, good afternoon, Pastor Becky.
Afternoon, Pastor Joe.
What people will not know, except that now I'm telling them, is that I've had just some major technical issues all day, and actually the last couple days with Zoom. And so, if you're feeling bad about, oh, I'm just not very technically savvy, Pastor Becky was saying like, oh, well, Joel, you're savvy. I'm like, oh, I'm failing so bad today, right? It's just how it works.
Those days happen. It's like a testament, or the same way things happen with day-to-day life and with ministry. Like,
Right.
it's a perfect example.
Exactly right. Yeah. Well, so I don't know exactly when this conversation will go out into the world, and it's March 14th, Saturday, March 14th today, and we're all waiting across the state for this blizzard to hit. How's it looking out there in Rapid City, Pastor Becky?
So right now, yeah, it was just dense fog, and it's like we're awaiting the snow coming in, and churches are wondering when do they make that call, depending on their location and the path of the storm out in this area as well too. So it's almost like this anticipation waiting game. I get this little glee about a possible snow day because we haven't really had a lot of them. But then also, like, out here on this day, like that hope, knowing that there are places that are dealing with forest fires. And so places like in Custer Lutheran Fellowship, or they're really jumping in to help out their community and anticipating, what can they do to care for those who might be displaced and evacuated.
Okay. Yeah, and we've, of course, well, you know your work as a rural ministry ambassador out in the Bear Butte Conference, West River. You know a lot of those places, and so I'm glad we get to chat right now. This is a long time coming. A goal I had when the first ambassador started, which was now just a little over a year ago. You and the other ambassador started January of 2025. And my goal had been to do these little interviews with each of you and to kind of, because we were building the plane while we were already flying it. And and those, I just never found the time.
Right.
And so part of the reason why I wanted to have this with you this week is that this is actually your last week as a rural ministry ambassador, because you are moving on to what sounds like a really interesting and lovely call, where you're going to be interim pastor for Lutheran Memorial in Pierre, right?
Correct.
All right.
Yeah, up to a possible 2-year interim, long term. So get ready. Continue the work that they've been doing in their transition time, and then get ready for what will next for them. So adapting, like rural ambassador, I learned a lot about adapting to the needs and the changes. Like sometimes, like I'm not a plane person, but I think, well, like building the plane as we go, sometimes we have to change the model of the plane. So, like a restart. And like moving into this new thing, it wasn't because I didn't like what I was doing. I actually really appreciated that, but I think this has kind of grown out of that. So it is like the needs out in Bear Butte have been different than other places that the ambassadors are. And so it's just trying to connect where those needs are for congregations, and then for rostered leaders. And, I just met this last week with 2 vicars that are serving, and had conversations with them, and just talking through what ministry is like, what their next steps are, what their needs are, and they're both doing well. So there's just a lot of changes, and it's like, and you never know what the week will look like, really.
There's a couple threads there that I want to pull on a little bit. One is the fact that all of the ambassadors, you've all embodied the role differently, right? And I think that's actually a strength, but then it also becomes a little bit hard to define what an ambassador is, because it's somewhat how each of us embody the role and the
Right.
needs of the local community, right? Of the people, because we don't all live in the same place. And so I think that's a strength, but then it becomes a little harder to define what it is. And I think maybe one of the things I want to talk about here for the rest of the synod as they listen in is the fact that there's this kind of openness to what it can be. And for you, one of the things I really valued is how you spent so much time with seminarians who are doing contextual learning out in the Bear Butte Conference, and those vicars that you were just mentioning, that you were really the ambassador who is most closely tied to the rural ministry immersion for seminarians program, which is also part of what's funded by the Lilly grant that we've received, the Journeying Together in Christ initiative. That really is you doing a lot of that. And people don't maybe know that, right? About that you took on those roles, and from our early conversation, that I think I don't know if I know that you felt called to that work, right? Yeah.
I really appreciate that part of it. Like, just being supportive and helping them in their practical ministry time, as well as they need to study.
Yeah.
Classes, they need to study. I mean, they're doing, and then they have things in their personal lives. So they're learning right away how to balance ministry and family and all those things all together. And it's been fun to see the congregations working with them when the congregations are like, I'd get a phone call and be like, we think our vicar is doing too much. Like, we love it, but we know they're a student first. And it's like, ding, 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 you've got it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Oh, see, I mean, so just the fact that I want people to hear that about what a great kind of thing that is to have the synod be able to have these roles, and that each of you as ambassadors have taken on different things. And so there's part of me that wants to talk about all the other ambassadors right now too, because they're doing really good things too. But that just means that I actually have to have conversations with them for another episode of Post on the Road, right? To see how these different things are happening around the synod, and how this work is kind of growing in this really kind of organic way, right? I mean, I think it's just great. And I can say this now, that I'm really going to miss having you. I was thinking about it on the drive into the office today, about like, why is it that I feel so connected to Pastor Becky Piper? And I think there's a couple of reasons, and I just want to share them, what was in my mind, and see what you think. I think one of them, even in the beginning, when you talked about the snowstorm coming and not having a snow day in a while, I mean, that connects me back to as a kid growing up in northern Wisconsin, and how much I loved snow days, right?
Right.
And then I think fairly early on, you and I connected about the fact that we both actually grew up in the driftless area where the glaciers never touched, and these kind of just I grew up on the Wisconsin side, you grew up in the Minnesota side, but all of these deep hills and kind of cliffs and other things that happen there. And I think that's one of the reasons why I feel like, connected in some ways. And so I just get to name that I feel I'm going to miss that now that you're moving on to other things.
That was a part of this, was like, I've appreciated you, and I appreciate the other rural ambassadors. Like, when we get together oftentimes this way via Zoom, because we're all over, but just the different backgrounds and supporting each other and sharing the stories, and this happened, or this is what I'm doing, and I'm amazed by all that. But then that those things that pop up and you're like, oh yeah, that's a connection. And I think that for me, that's when you think about defining this work? Like, how do you define it if it looks so different? It's almost like being a connector for the South Dakota Synod. And it's like, I think about that little get to know you thing. I've used it different times in ministry where you have, the ball of yarn and you hold on to it and you send out the ball, you hold on to it and send out the ball to the next person, and they hold on to it. So you end up with this web. So you're all kind of connected. And that's what we do with rural ambassadors, and then with the synod as well too. Like some of those strands might be pretty long on distance, but there still is that connection. And I appreciate the geography that like I have that deep sense to the driftless region. And when I came many years ago, came out to South Dakota, I was like, I had this almost panic, like it's so open. and so it was like understanding people's love for the space and the geography they're in, just like out in Bear Butte, either the Black Hills, the sacredness, or the time on the prairie, the Slim Buttes. Like there's all this beauty, and to spend time listening to how people are connected to it and how they care for those places, as well as that's helped me, like I have this sense of awe for the prairie space as well, while still I feel tied back to, that place that I grew up in. And again, so that's, again, that connector, it connects, but you connect people and you connect place and connect geography. And that all comes back to these different giftedness of the rural ambassadors that each one has and well. So it's kind of exciting to know that there can be that difference. But yeah, defining it like one set job description, but it can't be too specific because then it boxes up the ministry and the work that could happen.
Yep, exactly. So you were just making a connection for me. In my mind, I hadn't made this connection until just now, as you were talking. Last February, 2025, I was invited to spend some time with Brother Jonathan Oldhorse and Woyatan out in the hills. And after those 4 or 5 days together, he mentioned about how this book, God is Red, by Vine Deloria Jr., was a big touchstone book for him. And so I got it on audiobook, and that 6-hour drive or so from out kind of deep in the hills back to Sioux Falls, I listened, and I kept listening, right? And then picked up a copy. And one of the theologies that's central to Lakota spirituality and maybe even indigenous thinking about God theology is that God is a God of place. Whereas much of what I was brought up in kind of European Christianity, Lutheran, German, Slovak, right? Norwegian for you maybe, was that God is a God of time.
Yeah.
But the more I engage in this work and the more that I see how you embody ministry as ambassador in the hills and how the other ambassadors do their work in their places, it rings so true to me that the Lakota understanding of God as a God of place is so powerful. There's just something uniquely lovely about it. Now, I think maybe one of the other ways that you and I connected was that we're both a little, or at least I experienced of you as a bit of a bookworm. Is that true?
That is true.
All right. Okay. So I say that because as part of your kind of just ongoing education while you're ambassador, you started thinking about how to be an interim minister or interim ministry, because that's some of what the ambassador is sometimes asked to do. And so you picked up this Norman Bedroth book, Interim Ministry in Action, and you shared it. And you said with me, you said, "Oh, it's a really good book." And so I picked up a copy. And then immediately, the day that I got my first copy was when our newest ambassador, Tom Apoyan, came into my office. And everyone, Tom Apoyan, Pastor Tom Apoyan, is now a ministry, rural ministry ambassador starting this month in March. And I said, "Tom, would you be interested in something like this?" He's like, "Yes." And so I gave him the copy. So now I have my next copy. And I got two of them, so that in the next one I have to give away, I won't lose my own. So I haven't read it yet, but you're moving. It was a movement enough that now you're moving into your first official role as an interim minister, right, in Pierre.
Right. Like I had done a short-term interim, kind of not as intentional. In Belfouche in between their time. So like the book came along with continuing education in intentional interim training that I audited. So I audited the course and so the book really is that book is particularly a tool for congregations that they could utilize that. So it's got some pieces in it. And again, I always think it's not like taking it as a exact step-by-step, you must do this, because again, each congregation has a different culture or place.
Right.
Some of it might not be helpful or work. So I might have another book recommendation for you once I finish it on managing transitions. Kind of that same piece, but I took the course in light of rural ambassadors and that we're in places. We might be doing pulpit supply. We might be sharing resources with the congregation. We might be there when they're in transition. And so thinking of pieces or tools or even our presence, like when we, as a rural ambassador, step into a situation, we might not know all the story. So to be mindful of our own selves going into that, and then what could we offer them? So that's why that piece and then that training, I thought there's some things about it that could be helpful. And I think with the rural ambassadors, I think if they maybe get to experience them in their space, it opens them up to looking at what does their congregation look like and what could their needs be. Maybe those are different than what they thought they'd be. Like maybe they're open to something more or to shared ministry. I mean, we're seeing a lot of shared ministries and some of the financial capacity for congregations. You know, it can be really hard in smaller churches, rural places. And I think the Synod leadership has a heart for that. I've seen and experienced it, and I hope that congregations experience a piece of that also through the rural ambassadors. Like this is part of the why that we're doing this and why having folks connected through all of that. So yeah, that having a resource, a book, a resource, or a course, you take parts and pieces of that might work, and then some stuff you let go of because it's not going to fit our synod, or it's not going to fit the congregation that you move into, but it's nice to have something to start with for me.
Yeah.
And pieces that are in tools that are in that book could be something that a rural ambassador might say that would be a useful piece for this congregation that I visited, or I spent time with their council. Because sometimes, I've gone in as a rural ambassador to meet with a council.
Since I'm here in Sioux Falls and building the plane as we go, I don't have as many maybe opportunities to join in council meetings. And that's maybe good. Because you've been at this a lot longer than I have. I've been on an ELCA roster now for just over 5 years, and you have a much longer breadth of experience, not only as a rostered clergy person, but also as a South Dakotan, right? Because how many years have you been here in South Dakota?
Oh, since when did I start my first call? Let's see. Graduated 2005. So
Right.
yeah, long time. And
All right.
not, yeah, I've been in the synod.
The whole time, right? And so I think that this speaks to, I think, that God of place kind of piece, because all of the other ambassadors, you and I are the South Dakota newbies, because
Right.
all the other ambassadors have lived here their whole life, right? And so that rootedness is a strength that then allows them to be that trusted person to when there's a need or when there's a question. And so I know the other ambassadors, just like you, were saying, get invited to council meetings when there's a sticky widget or something to consider, or maybe a partnership, that those kinds of conversations are happening, because the trustedness of, you're my neighbor, and I want to have a trusted conversation with you. So because I'm the newest one to South Dakota, I know that doesn't happen as much for me. And that's as it should be, especially if we think about God as being a God of place.
Right.
Right? It's just fascinating. So, but that thinking, that theology is just lovely and new to me. And I'm just so glad that Jonathan Oldhorse brought it to me, right, in the last year. So that's part of my growth over this year. So, one of the books that we've read a couple of books now together as a team of Rome Ministry ambassadors. The first one I brought was this. I just found this book so fascinating. This is The Spirit of Hope by Byung-Chul Han. And I brought it, it was still in my car, and there's all these red underlines. Here's what I underlined, actually page 32 and 33. Forgiveness relates to the past by undoing what happened and thus creating free space for a new beginning. Then a little later in that paragraph, promises are isolated islands of certainty in an ocean of uncertainty. Then moving to page 33, if forgiveness makes the past manageable, a promise does this for the future. According to Arndt, forgiving and promising are two fundamental conditions of human action.
When we had a conversation, all ambassadors, it was really helpful to just hear how other people engage with it. But when I think of like forgiveness and promising, like I can think of in my mind right away, I jump to congregations that have had things that have happened to them, and how it takes some time. They get to a place of forgiveness and look back, and then it helps them focus on that promise that is for their future, or that they realize that they have a future, and so that the distance from the event or the situation that they've been able to forgive, and then the movement into the promise of who they are. And as of late, I had conversations with some congregation members about things that had happened to them, and where they've reflected and said, I was a participant in that, before I wanted to just pass that off on somebody else, but I was a participant in that, and it's like what that looks like for them now and moving forward, versus maybe situations where that forgiveness and promise, like it feels like there's some being stuck in it. And so it's like, how do you have the promise if you haven't been able to let go? It's not that you have to, you don't completely forget, because if that situation arises, you want to have tools and things for that. But you get stuck, and then there's not room for the promise. So congregations who might be struggling through that, and I've seen they haven't quite yet had that sense of forgiveness, relationship with a synod or a relationship with a previous leader or something. And so then it's like, how do we move into the promise, where it's not just a concept or idea?
Right. It lived experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
I I didn't know if I would go here in this conversation, but I think I do. I want to say again. I mean, this is a private conversation you and I had, but it leads to this idea of being stuck, right? And so the book I'm this last year, because of all the driving that this work is, I'm doing audiobooks, a lot of audiobooks, and it almost becomes a way that I kind of triage what do I really want to spend time reading when I can actually physically hold a book, right? And so one of the books that I engaged with at seminary, but really just to like write a paper, right, was A Failure of Nerve by Edwin Friedman. Have you read this book?
I have. It's been a while.
The idea of being stuck, right? It's part of this book. It's trying to address leadership in culture and in lots of places. And so I was thinking about, I think it would have maybe been the first or second week, really early on when we started, and I made this dumb statement. And I want to say the statement because I don't want to hide the fact of how dumb it was. And it was, I think it was in an email, right? I was comparing something and making a really just biased slur, and whatever it was, I don't remember what it was I was describing, but I was like, it's kind of like the redheaded stepchild. And immediately after I wrote it and sent off that email, I was like, does Pastor Becky have red hair? Oh, crap. And I was stuck. This is what I was thinking about today on the drive over to the office, that I was so fearful about crashing the plane. We had just started. That I think that I didn't immediately, out of my own fear, right? That I didn't immediately address it. Mm-hmm. But you unstuck me because you did. That you reached out to me privately and said, that's not okay. And I was like, yes. And so I was right. It was so helpful. And I think it's one of the reasons why I have so valued over the last, 14 months, the fact that because we got through that, because you said that wasn't okay and I agreed, and then we talked about it a little bit in the next ambassador meeting, that it seasoned the last year really well. But my failure of nerve wouldn't have been addressed if you hadn't said something. And I feel like that's a model that I want to lift up for the people who listen to these little podcasts and the people as they go to their council meetings and as they engage in community.
Because we have a route for that. Like what I appreciated, because I felt like I could go to you and say, "Oh, hey, maybe you didn't realize this. Like this is how I experienced that, or what this me." Yeah. Like sometimes, like I know I used a phrase and not understanding the meaning behind it, and then if somebody is able to point that out, it's like now I know better, mm-hmm. So I can do better. And the fact that you were willing and wanting to have the whole ambassadors talk about that, so that when we all meet together, it's like this is how we can address. Let's be open. Mm-hmm. If we hear something and like modeling that, because I think you're right. Like, this is a model. I mean, we often have that for congregations and behavior together. Like, you go to the person. I mean, scriptural. You go to the person, or then there's a model for that. And how often do failure of nerve? We just like I'm just going to be quiet about it and it'll go away. Like it
doesn't really go away. Right. Yeah. And like, one of those things that's true about our ELCA congregational constitutions, right? The scripture that is lifted up within the constitution of every congregation is Matthew 18. And it is that, this is how we are to talk to one another when we're in disagreement. And so I think that's, really good. Well, all that was in my mind this morning as I knew that this was going to be, well, one of the times, so the last time that you and I officially kind of have this on the same team, even though we're obviously always on the same team, right? And I do agree with the idea that there isn't really us and them, there's just us and more of us. And Christ breaking into our place is to, in a lot of ways, show that that place over there is also where Jesus is. And it could be as close by as the town next over, or it might be as, distant as halfway around the world, which sometimes that's what it feels like between Rapid City and Sioux Falls. So, because I'm trying to, keep those conversations going, right? Especially when we have like a group, like with the ambassadors reading The Gift of Small, Alan Stanton. And I sent copies of all that to the Small Town and Rural Task Force. And of course, in the year since I read God is Read by Vine Deloria, the First Nations Psalms has come out.
Okay.
And so that one is something that is a lovely, just stays in my backpack, right? And now I'm gonna, because philosophy is not everyone's cup of tea, but when I was preaching for you, when was this? Was this February 15th? Was it a month ago that I was?
Oh my gosh, it probably was already a month.
Yeah, so a month ago, I was filling in for you at Grand River Lutheran Church in Buffalo, and after the service, I drove a highway that I hadn't driven before, which is kind of rare for me because I traveled so many years as a musician all across the states and all across the world. And so I was on a new stretch of road, and I remembered how awesome that felt back when it was also new in the late 90s, and I was traveling because I grew up in a small town in northern Wisconsin, and I didn't travel, right? My folks, my dad ran his chiropractor and had his own health clinic, and my mom was a nurse, and when they would leave, they would have to close shop. And so the only real trip as a kid growing up was to go and see the grandparents in central Illinois, right? And that my mom's folks and my dad's folks were in small town rural Wisconsin too. And so I got this wanderlust as of an 18-year-old in college. And so just traveling like that, a new road always felt so welcoming to me. And that happened after leaving Buffalo, and it hadn't happened in a long time. And so I'm driving through, and I get to this, is it the Slim Buttes?
Oh, yeah.
That? Yeah, isn't it gorgeous?
Yes.
It's just amazing. You come up on this thing, and it's just like, what is this? And I don't even, what's the highway? Now, see, I almost feel like maybe I'm dishonoring it because like now people will go on and go find this place because it's just this little gem, right? But yeah, right. Yeah. Be quiet about it. But what is that road that goes between Buffalo and Bison?
Yes. Highway 20.
Highway 20. So I'm in the West, leaving Buffalo, take Highway 20. You go through this area called the Slim Buttes, which is just fascinating geography. And then I come to Bison, and I come to Bison to hang out with Eliza Blue, who is a musician here in South Dakota. And she and I, we end up, she and her whole family, her husband, her kids, we're all hanging out on the porch and just talking about life. And so because I am such a fan now of this Korean German philosopher who wrote this book that we read together, that now I'm sorry, like this one I'm reading.
Interesting.
And the crisis of narration, the burnout society, right? These are all super accessible, especially if you're into Korean German Catholic philosophy. But here's his newest one. And so I ordered 2 copies, and I got one to Eliza and one to me. So we're reading it together, In Praise of the Earth.
Oh, okay.
And so I don't have a review for it yet, but this is my, when I have time to physically be in the same space, which might be because of the snowstorm, I might get to read it.
Yeah.
Because I won't be driving.
I just saw it was the South Dakota Library Association. They put something about, they put the state of South Dakota on, and they were talking about the snowstorm. And based on how much snow parts of the state we're going to get, they listed it based on how many books you should have available to read during that time. So if it's 8 to 10 inches, you should have 8 to 10 books. You should, and I was like, I love it. I love that.
That's great.
Because it's like that learning. But yeah, that Slim Buttes area, one thing I've appreciated with some of the driving around is the exploration of places. And I have a list of things that I'd like to do to explore. And I've always done that. Like I'll go to a place that's, everybody goes and does this when they're here. I'm like, well, what is something that most people don't do? And then that's what I seek out. Or it's like over to the Slim Buttes, and there's a little campground there, but there's a viewpoint, and there's some kind of trails. They're not like highly marked, but I just go kind of explore. And I know I would post a picture, and people would be like, "Oh my gosh, there's mountain lions! Be careful." I'm like, I also live in the area where there's mountain lions too.
Right. Yeah.
That's a part of it. But just being, even when I've done that, they'll be like, okay, here's another 2 people that are exploring, or I can see off in the distance somebody on a horse. They're enjoying that area too. But the Cave Hills are also interesting location, or kind of taking a road and seeing the area. There's more there in some of these rural places. My aunt, I think somebody's like, "Oh, Pastor Becky, you're off in the middle of nowhere." And one of my aunts from Minnesota said, "Oh, Becky, you're in the middle of somewhere." And I'm like, yes, we're in the middle of somewhere. I mean, it's like, oh, you can't go live in the middle of nowhere. You're in the middle of some these places and congregations and small towns, and it's like you are in the middle of somewhere. And relating it to that. So what, In Praise of the Earth, was that title of that book that you're going to
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what
here we are.
Like ministry in the middle of somewhere. That's what we're doing.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think I think this maybe is the natural ending, right? What a great way to end this conversation, to say that we're in the middle of somewhere. And that leads me back to that just key insight of Vine Deloria, Lakota spiritual leader who wrote God is Red, when he highlights how God is a God of place, that you're never in the middle of nowhere. And that's powerful. And I think, some of the learning that I got to do with you this year. So I'm really thankful. So
and I think that's it just says something like we are learning as we go along as well. Like there's things that we're learning, and it's been great. And it's like I joked about getting a title still, so I can say I'm still a part of the group. The
honorary ambassador. We need to actually create that ambassador emeritus. I love it.
But the connections between folks remains. You have a new ambassador come on, one that is going off to do something else in ministry, but then it's like there's those connections, and the congregations, they're still connected too. So we I appreciate it. Appreciate your work and the work that continues on for rural ministry.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for being a part of this team. I mean, it's just been a great year together. And just so you know, South Dakota Synod, we are in conversations about who will be the next ambassador out in Bear Butte, maybe even more than one. And so that information is coming soon too. All right, everybody. The storm is coming, but know that you are in the middle of somewhere, and that God is there with you and God is there with us. God bless you all this week. Thank you, Pastor Becky.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.